So welcome to my presentation on art and religion. This is Elizabeth Pyjov, and it's March 26, 2020, presenting the week of Peter Brueghel. This presentation will focus on how we can use Buddhism to understand Peter Brueghel as a mystic. We'll start with the painting we read about, Hunters in the Snow, and I'll start with some personal information. I had a really transcendent experience viewing Hunters in the Snow at the Kunsthistorische Museum in Vienna, Austria. I looked at it for 3 hours, and I just could not stop looking at that painting, and it gave me such a sense of tranquility. It gave me such a sense of peace to look at it. This is where I realized that there might be something mystical about Peter Brueghel, and I wanted to look more deeply into this artist and see what philosophies he has behind his art and what concepts are there, because I felt almost the kind of experience I have from doing a Buddhist meditation. And I had that from viewing this huge, beautiful Hunters in the Snow painting, where everything just seemed calm and under the snow, and also very grounded, and there was so much to look at. It actually did make me think of Buddhism then. And then redoing the readings for class this week, it confirmed my intuition that Peter Brueghel might have a Buddhist sensibility. And this is what I'll explore in this presentation. And that's why it's called Peter Brueghel, in quotes, the Buddhist. So I am an MTS in Buddhist Studies, which is why Buddhism is on my mind. I'll give some background on what I mean by Buddhism, because I realize there are many Buddhisms, many versions of Buddhism. I think a common strand throughout is that Buddhism values awareness. This is why a mindfulness practice is at the center of many forms of Buddhism. And Buddhism does not call itself a religion. It's not about a certain set of doctrines. What it focuses on is connecting to reality, connecting to, as it says in scripture, the true and the real. So the key question for Buddhism is, what is reality? How does it present itself? And what's really there? And one very big concern of Buddhism is a kind of lack of clarity that comes from judgment, of the lack of clarity that comes from judging experience, of looking at something and saying this is good or this is bad, kind of putting it into preset categories that may or may not match the thing itself. And something that Buddhist scripture does over and over again is to try to show how opposites interact, or how opposites might both be true at the same time. So a key phrase from the Lotus Sutra, the key Mahayana Buddhist text, is that poison is medicine. So kind of a thing is both at the same time. Or the Buddhist Japanese thinker from the 13th century, Shinran, wrote, "I am a foolish being destined for hell, and I am a Buddha. I am both. I have both now." So Buddhism focuses on this sense that every possibility contains within it the opposite possibility. So we don't know for sure what is good and what is bad. It's kind of the greater point here. And the painting I'll discuss in a second, Brueghel's fight between CARNIVAL or LENT, has this similar non-judgmental quality to it, where neither CARNIVAL nor LENT is presented as good or bad. So that's some Buddhist background to kind of use as a launching point for this discussion. I think the reason that Buddhism is so concerned with a non-judgmental attitude is this belief that everything is leading to enlightenment anyway, because everything is already enlightened. So who are we to say that one thing leads us to enlightenment better than another thing? And if a thing is already enlightened, and if the good and the bad interplay in a very interesting way. And again, Brueghel also displays reality as he sees it with clarity, and he withholds judgment. So this is the passage in the reading from this week that made me think of this idea in relation to Brueghel. This is from John Berger. "He made no neat division," he of course being Brueghel, "between the innocent and the guilty. He refrained from moralizing. He set no single figure up as a bad or good example. His moral passion is revealed only in the unwavering determination with which he presents the facts for judgment. It was beyond him to condemn a single act, a single person, because he cannot see how most people could behave otherwise. So what this suggests is a connection to reality. Kind of, Brueghel is concerned with observation. He's not concerned with evaluation. Rather, he is so good at showing opposite forces as they play out in the universe and showing them with a kind of openness that, again, I would call a very Buddhist openness. So here's an image of bringing together of opposites, of holding opposites. Both Buddhist theology and Brueghel's paintings are concerned with holding opposites, bringing them together. With Brueghel, it's actually often bringing the magical into the ordinary. So there's a painting of a scene where a lot is going on, and there's just a little Virgin Mary trying to find shelter with baby Jesus, and it's just a tiny little part of the painting. So ordinary life and then something completely magical, completely out of the ordinary. Or at the end of this presentation, we'll get a quick glimpse of Icarus's fall. So in Greek mythology, Icarus just flew with wax wings, and it's this magical moment where a man just flew for the first time, and it's mixed with the ordinary. So often there's an interplay of the opposites of ordinary and magical, and how they interrelate. The painting will examine the fight between Carnival and Lent. A lot of people see it as an interplay of good and bad, and I would argue against that interpretation and say that defies the whole point and goes completely against Brueghel's philosophy to talk about an interplay of good and bad. Just to make this holding opposites, bringing together of opposites concrete in Buddhism, the thing that Buddhism values the most is awareness and compassion. And awareness and compassion are really seen as the same thing. So to be truly aware is to have compassion. To have compassion is to be truly aware. So it's kind of the two wings of a bird. So compassion and awareness is the goal, what we're working toward, the best thing about the universe. What we're working to end is suffering. So the worst thing about the universe is all this suffering. The interesting thing is about how those opposites come together. Compassion is born out of an encounter with suffering. So if we were to take away all the suffering in the universe, like take away every crying child, take away every need, there wouldn't be space in that world for compassion. Like if everyone was perfectly happy, there wouldn't be space for compassion. In that sense, suffering and compassion, those two opposites, are mutually constituent. Compassion does not exist until there is suffering existing. And if you take one thing away, the other goes away. So that's one kind of holding opposites in Buddhism, along with like the Shinran quote that I am destined for hell and I'm also a Buddha, and along with the Lotus Sutra quote that poison is medicine. This just comes up again and again in Buddhism. So I apologize that I spent so much time on the religion part. We'll now go to the art part of this presentation. Here's the painting I want to discuss, the fight between Carnival and Lent. But hopefully we set the scene to really analyze this from a Buddhist perspective. This painting shows two opposites perfectly. If you were to divide the painting kind of sideways or crosswise between the left upper corner and the right bottom corner, you get two halves, and two halves of two opposites. So in this sense, this is almost like, it is the exact same structure as this image with the coffee. Like divide this painting in the same way that this coffee image is divided. So if you look at this in the same way, if we kind of go like this, you'll see two complete opposites of Brueghel's time. So we are positioned in 1559, and this is a ritual battle or a fight between Carnival and Lent. And this was actually a battle that took place in a historic series of ceremonies, which took place between the Feast of the Kings, or the Epiphany, and Easter. And this is a great topic for Brueghel to explore, kind of this contrast. The opposites you see here are many, and if we were in class, I'd ask you to volunteer and tell me what you see. But on the left side of the painting, we have feast. On the right side of the painting, we have famine. On the left side of the painting, there's winter. On the right, there's spring. And you'll even notice, if you look really, really closely, that on the left, the Carnival side, the trees have no leaves. And on the right, the trees do have leaves. I think it's just such a cool detail. Again, to kind of set up this holding of opposites that the painting provides. And of course, the main opposites are Lent and Carnival. They're opposites in and of themselves. So Lent on the right stands for abstinence and spiritual purification to prepare for Easter. Carnival on the left means enjoyment, indulgence of the body, decadence, revelry. To ground these opposites, on the left side of the painting is an inn. So kind of the anchor on the left is this inn for enjoyment, for food, for wine. On the right side is church, for religious observance, for piety. On the church side of the painting, we can see typical displays of Christian piety, like prayers and fasting and almsgiving, and it's all somber and it's all very serious. And then on the left side of the painting, there's gluttony and dancing and games, and it's very light. So these are the opposites the painting holds. Where I feel that Brueghel's sensibility is Buddhist is that the painting doesn't prefer one side over the other. Brueghel actually treats the two sides impartially. So the painting shows that it's almost like in his mind, neither is good or bad. It's just life. It's just a piece of life. Again, back to Buddhism, it's just the true and the real. It's reality. Both are expressions of sides of life, and it's not clear if one is the shadow side or one is the dark side. So I just want to show a detail of, so this is the painting on a bigger screen for you to enjoy. And then a detail of the painting. This is at the bottom center. We have obese Carnival riding on a barrel with a spit for his spear, and he is up against a thin, emaciated, ascetic, proper-looking Lent who's sitting very upright and is using a baker's shovel as a weapon. And there's a lot of symbolism here, like with the fish and Jesus Christ. But what I really want to focus on is how not seriously Brueghel takes both of these. The face of Lent, so the kind of the guy with the white around his head, Lent on the right, it was copied from a Bosque drawing, from a witch in a Bosque drawing. So kind of the thing that's supposed to be the most sacred and the most holy, Lent or Easter, is copied from kind of what is dark, a witch, kind of dark supernatural forces, the opposite of the church. And again, with Brueghel, we see these opposites coming together, these opposites forming a unity. It's a very Buddhist claim that opposites constantly form a whole, constantly form a unity. Kind of Brueghel uses that sensibility. What I want to point out in this close-up is that Brueghel isn't taking Lent or the church too seriously. Both figures seem problematic, and both figures are comic. So a very typical interpretation of the time was like, oh look, Brueghel painted this battle between good and evil, this battle between Carnival and Lent. But I think that was a very simple explanation, and Brueghel was very much ahead of his time. He didn't slap those labels, he didn't put those judgments on what he was displaying. He's much more complicated, much more nuanced than that. Rather, Brueghel is kind of making fun of both sides, and he's not letting either of them have the moral upper hand. It's a very Buddhist idea that it's not that we need kind of less of one, more of the other, that one is good, one is bad. The painting actually doesn't have any of the preferential treatment. It is not moralized. Brueghel could easily be saying like, oh, let's get rid of Carnival, make way for more Lent, make way for more piety, for more moderation. He doesn't say that. And he also doesn't make the simple point that let's get rid of Lent, the church is problematic, we need more Carnival, we need more freedom, more wildness. This is a point we would associate with a free-spirited artist. But he doesn't make that point. Rather, he almost shows that two sides of the same coin, two sides of human experience, and he displays both without saying one is good or bad. Another interpretation that is not related to the point I'm making at all, but that I think is worth mentioning in this close-up, just to be kind of true to the multiplicity of interpretations, is that it is possible, and I think this is pretty valid, that it's possible that Lent represents Catholicism, while Carnival represents the Lutheran Reformation, because the Lutherans had abolished Lent but still celebrated Carnival. But again, the analysis in a way still makes sense because it's two opposites meaning. It's kind of two opposite Christian sensibilities having a battle. And it's still a question of not treating one strand of Christian thought preferentially as opposed to the other. So back to the whole painting. Brueghel, in many of his paintings, including this one, shows a bird's eye view. Kind of what's the biggest perspective that I can take on all of this? How much can I zoom out? What's the biggest perspective? And this reminds me of Buddhism. I was like, what is the biggest view that I can take on the situation? Rather than being caught up in kind of my own petty emotions, my own petty judgments, my own petty narrow-minded views, the impulses of the moment, what's the biggest view that I can take on the situation? And that's a question of awareness, and it's often a question of compassion. And I feel that Brueghel kind of displays this, let me zoom out as much as possible. Let me see the situation from a bird's eye view. And let me remain impartial. So let me have kind of a view that is not stirred by the emotions of the moment. Very Buddhist, also very much Peter Brueghel the Elder. So again, Brueghel just zooms out and shows that Carnival, Lent, they're just natural extremes of the human experience, that each has its own proper sphere, each one has a place in society, each one has a season, and most importantly, this is life, and it's a respect for life. And I think it's a painting for life that, it's a painting celebrating a life that actually contains both, and reality that in a way contains both. So as we view this painting, you might be wondering, okay, so yes, Brueghel's impartial, yes, he doesn't prefer one to the other, but what's the bigger message? Like, is there a bigger message? Is the message just to be balanced, or is there a deeper message to this painting? And how is that message linked to Buddhism? So I believe that there is a bigger message to this painting, and it is kind of in this point that you see marked in red, that the point he is trying to make is the value of the middle way, that life contains all kinds of extremes, and that kind of the key to the painting lies in this image hidden right in the center, also in the center, in the middle way. I think Brueghel really wants us to identify ourselves with this couple in the center, to put ourselves in our shoes, to see life from their perspective. I think it's interesting that the couple has their backs to us. We don't see their face. They're facing us, like kind of their backs are facing us pretty directly. And I think with that visual perspective, that couple is a stand-in for all of us. I believe that after contemplating this wonderful painting, I think that the message is stay out of this madness, follow your own path. And if you really look at the painting, it's like a spiral. It's kind of a spiral that starts with the church and then goes to the house on the left, goes to the inn, and kind of spirals towards this couple, kind of artistically. Our attention is drawn towards the center, is drawn towards this couple. They're really the nucleus of the painting, and I think that's where the message lies. So again, I think this painting has a wonderful message, like good advice for any time, for any era. Stay out of the extremes, stay out of kind of the very dogmatic viewpoints, and follow your own path. This couple is not following Lent, is not following Carnival. They're just walking humbly, what looks like mindfully, calmly, on their own path. And I think that is a very deep message for a painting. They're steering clear of kind of these movements that are around them. They're steering clear of asceticism. They're steering clear of self-indulgence. And they're taking the middle way. I keep repeating this phrase, the middle way, the middle path, because it is a very Buddhist term. I will show you a close-up of the couple. That's them kind of humbly walking along. And I'll show you an image that structurally is actually very similar to the painting of the fight between Carnival and Lent. So I'll go back. So the painting of Carnival Lent has this left side that's indulgence and this right side that's asceticism. These statues, same thing, left side, indulgence, right side, asceticism. So this fits right into my Brueghel's Buddhist interpretation. A key of Buddhism is the celebration of the wisdom of the middle path. The Buddha's goal was to end suffering, and he realized that to end suffering is to follow his own inner guide, his own breath, his own meditation, really a moderate, balanced viewpoint, and not to follow any extremes. The Buddha was born as a prince, Siddhartha, in a palace where he had every indulgence. So he started the first part of his life with every indulgence. And he understood that self-indulgence doesn't work. So again, self-indulgence akin to Carnival in the painting. And after leaving the palace, he practiced asceticism and self-mortification for years. Again, akin to Lent, right? Self-mortification, Lent. And he learned that's not helpful either. So here we have kind of the fat Buddha on the left, the ascetic Buddha on the right. According to Buddhism, neither is going to lead to enlightenment or lead to spiritual knowledge. It's important to walk a middle path between the way of pleasure and the way of asceticism. And according to this view of the middle way, no one path is absolutely valid. And I think this is a deeper wisdom of this couple walking along their own way, that no one path that anyone will offer you will be absolutely valid. So it's not only like, oh, just take the two extremes, break even, that's moderation. That's not even the point. The point goes one level deeper, that no one will give you the answer. No movement, no school of thought, nothing will really give you the answer. It's important to find your own path in the universe through all the difficult questions. And the Buddha always said, like, oh, as a Buddha, I don't have the answers. The only thing that can guide you is reality. But really, the only thing that can guide you is your awareness of reality, kind of how you pay attention to reality, whether you have a clarity on reality. And if you follow a movement, you're following a category, which will take you away from reality. So this is kind of the deeper point of this middle path, of this middle way, both of the couple walking on their own path and the Buddha reaching enlightenment through meditation. So to wrap this up, I do see Peter Brueghel as having a Buddhist sensibility because he is first and foremost a humane observer of a chaotic environment. There is so much chaos in a painting like this, but his awareness seems calm and detached. His way of presenting the chaos seems calm and detached. And I think that's why I felt this flood of tranquility when viewing Hunters in the Snow for the first time. That he has this observation without judging. So he paints a scene as he sees it, without taking sides, without pushing for a certain movement. He retains kind of this neutral attitude, which to me is reminiscent of Buddhist non-attachment. So what I would call Peter Brueghel's vision is a kind of mindfulness or clarity of vision or respect for reality as it is, without the need to slap on a judgment or slap on a category. He just wants to show things as they are in ordinary life. So I want to share this amazing Brueghel painting of The Fall of Icarus, where the opposites of what is ordinary and what is magical comes together. And this painting, again, has this Buddha sensibility of not judging. In this painting, you'll see kind of the legs under the ship. And that's Icarus, who just was, in Greek mythology, was the first human being to ever fly. And the sun melted his wings, and he ends up crashing in the water. So it's this magical moment where the first human being ever was able to fly. And people were just going about their daily tasks without noticing. Kind of people were just doing their jobs. And again, Brueghel paints these people without judging them. He paints the scene without judging it. So again, just like Carnival and Lent, both have a stake in being the right path, but neither one holds the truth. It's kind of the same idea here. So just to wrap this up, I think Brueghel, with his art, shows this idea that there's really no truth that we can grasp at. The truth is our path. The truth is what we learn along the path. He has this kind of generative indeterminacy. As a mystic, as a painter who is a mystic, he asks us to not accept either version as the absolute truth, and not to accept an absolute truth, and not to be content with someone giving us a predetermined answer. And I think this is a very spiritual message. It's a very challenging message. It's a very inspiring message, that it's important to be at peace with the world as it is, to observe the world as it is, not to despair over the way the world is, very relevant for us in times of coronavirus, to see this imperfection and yet to find this path that is fully our own. So at this point, I'd ask if there are questions, but please type them in the canvas, and I'm really excited to hear what you think about this, and if you're as excited about Peter Bruegel as I am. I really love this painter who gives us no promise of perfection, no promise of an answer, only a promise of something that's imperfect, and a belief that it's important for every person to find their own path. So thank you for listening, and have a wonderful day or night.